We're heading into the fantasy football with the gloves off and a full deck of cards. So that means we better be ready for a fight and ready for some big names to be left outside the top 30 because all teams are playing, no more bye weeks. So make sure to go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And I'll be giving away 5 free FFN hats. And the way to qualify to get one is to go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and give me your hottest take for week 15 of the fantasy football season. So getting into our first tier right here, Jamar Chase is number 1 for obvious reasons. Nico Collins at number 2 for also, in my opinion, very obvious reasons. Jamar Chase, we have to go through it, right? He's playing Tennessee. The matchup is fantastic, and the guy has been an absolute animal. Jamar Chase has had a massive night again for like the 10th time this year, it feels like, on Monday night versus the Dallas Cowboys. This guy can do it against anybody, and I don't think it's going to stop him with Tennessee. And then we've got Nico Collins here versus Miami. I think the matchup is fantastic. They just got ripped apart by the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, and Devontae Adams. So I don't think Nico Collins gets slowed down by this because Nico Collins is averaging more than 16 fantasy points per game. This guy has been a stud, and he's the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. I'm all over him in my fantasy playoffs. And in this tier, I think Puka Nacua has snuck his way in. So for weeks now, I've been saying that him and Cooper Kupp are like conjoined twins. They have not separated from each other. They're both fantastic, but Cooper Kupp was getting the higher percentage throws and a lot of throws at the goal line. Well, Puka Nacua has separated from him because he was always averaging more targets, and the big playability has been brought back to life. I don't know if it's whether he's healthy or not again, but Puka Nacua has been an absolute animal for basically the past month. I think he has snuck his way inside of the top tier because he's usually getting around 10 to 13 targets per game at this point over the last month, and the way that he's been performing versus the San Francisco 49ers on Thursday night, I think Puka's in for a big game. Put this guy in your lineup for sure this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got Justin Jefferson at the top here at 4 and Terry McLaurin at 5. Now, this may feel low for Justin Jefferson. I'll tell you this. I actually debated putting Justin Jefferson down below Terry McLaurin. Obviously, we know that Justin Jefferson had an elite week versus the Atlanta Falcons. That's an easy matchup to do it against. And I'm not doubting the player that Justin Jefferson is, obviously. I've been defending him. I said it doesn't matter that he's been having lower games because I know this guy's potential and his ceiling is elite. And we saw that ceiling. But the Chicago Bears are a different story, man. They are a tough defense against wide receivers. Now, the one thing that put him above Terry McLaurin this week for me was the fact that Juwan Jennings just absolutely ripped them apart on Sunday in week 14. So I think Justin Jefferson, the way that the Vikings and Sam Darnold in particular are playing, can easily do that. And then Terry McLaurin here at number 5. At the New Orleans Saints, the matchup's fantastic. He's coming off a bye week, and I get tired of defending him a little bit because I feel like it's so obvious. Are you ready? This guy's been consistent. He's been one of the most consistent receivers in fantasy this year. This guy has had 3 games with less than 10 fantasy points in a half PPR format. This guy's been ultra consistent with a ceiling of about 25 fantasy points. You put Terry McLaurin in your lineup and you don't say anything about it. This guy's got a great combo of a high ceiling and a really high floor. And against New Orleans, I don't see that changing. And then rounding out this tier at number 6 and 7, Amon-Ra St. Brown and AJ Brown. These are 2 unique cases right here because they are both basically doing the same thing. Massive guys that we know are great and can give you big games, but are majorly disappointing us over the last month. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown in particular over the last month, he's had 1 game that was above 10 fantasy points in a half PPR format in the last 4 games. And that game was massive. It was against Jacksonville, 33 fantasy points. And this week against the Bills, like they should theoretically be in a really high scoring matchup this week. But the way he has played against lesser opponents like Indianapolis and Green Bay, they're a beatable secondary. He's getting 7 targets per game and it's not working very well. So this just goes to show how complete of a team they are. And that's the one thing that scares me with Amon-Ra is that he's not the focal point of the wide receiver group every single week anymore. Last year, Jameson Williams wasn't evolving. He has evolved this year, and it has taken away the floor for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's why he's down here at 6. Whereas with AJ Brown, I think it's a problem with Jalen Hurts. This guy, if you take the tush push away, if you just look at his throwing, it's actually not been particularly good this year. He has not been slinging the ball all over. And AJ Brown, after a win, complained about his targets. Like, after they beat the Panthers, in a game where he should have went off, he complained after the game. Now they get the Pittsburgh Steelers, a much tougher matchup. I've got concerns with A.J. Brown, man. Honestly, this may even feel a little too high for me personally. I'd like to know what you guys think about this one, though. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Jerry Jeudy at number 8 and Juwan Jennings at number 9. With these two guys, they're red hot. Like, Jerry Jeudy particularly is red hot because he's been doing it for basically the past month. Like, Jerry Jeudy with Jameis Winston is just catching the moment at the right time in the fantasy playoffs. You can't put this guy on your bench. I should have him ranked higher than this. Kansas City is theoretically actually a pretty beatable matchup here. So this guy's ceiling, I think, is just as high as A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown's. Maybe I should put him in the next tier above him because I think that this guy cannot go on your bench under any circumstances at all. And then I think with Juwan Jennings here, I had said this leading into the week. Juwan Jennings with Brock Purdy is a must-start guy. Now, I did end up moving him down from must-start to high-end flex territory last week because of the fact they were playing the Bears. I should have just left him there. This guy with Brock Purdy, it's unquestionable at this point. He is the number 1 wide receiver. And it's not even questionable anymore that he's been better than Deebo Samuel the entire year. Juwan Jennings is having a true breakout year this year. He's ultra important for them. So on Thursday night in a big matchup where both teams are fighting for playoff spots, I think Juwan Jennings has another good game. And then number 10 and 11, Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp, man. Tyreek Hill comes back. I mean, I forgot about him, right? Like, Tyreek Hill, I've kind of bought back in. Kind of. Not fully. And some people may disagree with this ranking, and I don't blame you, but I'd like to hear the argument for why. Because Tyreek Hill, I will say this, obviously goes off and has a Tyreek Hill type of game, as he should in Week 14 versus the Jets. Has 14 targets, over 100 yards for a touchdown. But the reason I'm not fully bought back in is because it's going to take more than that. Like, heading into our fantasy playoffs, I still don't know if I trust his floor being more than like 10 fantasy points. Because this guy has not crossed 100 yards, but twice this year. That was the second time he's done it, and that was the first time since Week 1. So I've still got my issues here versus Houston. I don't particularly view as the best matchup. He'll probably be matched up with Derek Stingley quite a bit. And then I've got, Cooper Kupp here at San Francisco. Like I said, super good play because of the fact that his ceiling is high. Now, the problem with him and the reason he's ranked below Tyreek is that even though I just kind of, dumped on Tyreek's floor a little bit, his floor is higher than Cooper Kupp's. Kupp's floor was what we saw in Week 13. Kupp can easily give you, a 3-point game or a 5-point game because sometimes, he's not the focal point and Puka dominates. So if San Francisco can slow their passing game down, that probably is going to hurt Kupp more than it hurts Puka. And I think that Kupp is at risk of that this week on a short week versus the San Francisco 49ers, who all of a sudden have a shot of life to him. Jackson Smith-Njigba at 12 and Davante Adams at 13. With JSN versus Green Bay, matchup is great. And realistically, I would love to put JSN higher. He's actually a top 6 wide receiver in fantasy football as of this moment in time. But the reality is, with JSN, if you look at the targets the past 3 weeks, he's had 7 targets, 4 targets, and 5 targets. Now, he's done great in fantasy because it's working. He's been very efficient, and he's getting in the end zone and doing well after the catch. But at the same time, that's a target share like Amon-Ra St. Brown's been getting, where at any moment, it could kind of go the other direction. So that's the only thing that's keeping him a little bit behind this week for me, and I would love to put him higher because I'm a big Jackson Smith-Njigba guy. And Davante Adams, listen, I said this when they first got Davante Adams to New York. I thought that he was going to be the number 1 wide receiver for them at some point because Garrett Wilson just doesn't have the chemistry that's been built over, the better course of a decade between Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen it come through, particularly in the past month. Now, Garrett Wilson has a great game. We'll get to him in a little bit. But Davante Adams particularly, this guy's floor has become really safe because he's getting more than 10 targets per game over the past 5 games. This guy's floor has become really safe. And the ceiling, as we just saw, is pretty freaking high. So he gets Jacksonville this week. I love this matchup, and I like playing Davante Adams all of a sudden. Dropping down to our next tier right here. I've got Mike Evans here at 14 and Courtland Sutton at 15 here. Now, with Mike Evans here, I think that it's important to say this. Mike Evans is a boomer bust player still. And it shouldn't be that way because I was disappointed by what happened against the Las Vegas Raiders. He had 5 targets in that game. Now, McMillan gets the touchdowns in that game. I don't have a problem with him not scoring, but I do have a problem with 5 targets because Chris Godwin is not there. So it was disheartening to see that against a really beatable matchup, where this week they get the Chargers, and I don't like that matchup particularly well. So I have a problem with this matchup. He's down a little bit lower than maybe he will be in future weeks. And with Cortland Sutton at 15 versus Indianapolis, ride the wave, brother. Ride the wave with Cortland Sutton. This guy's been awesome in fantasy football. He's a top 11 wide receiver right now, averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game. And over the past, 6 games, basically, he's been pretty dominant. He's clearly their wide receiver one, averaging about 8 to 10 targets per game. This guy should not go anywhere near your bench against a really beatable matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts off of a bye week. Garrett Wilson at 16 and T. Higgins at 17. So Garrett Wilson lands here. Let's talk about it, right? Great matchup, like I just went over with Devontae Adams. It reminds me of going with Tyreek Hill, right? Like I said, I can't trust Tyreek Hill. I can't trust Garrett Wilson just yet either, because Garrett Wilson most of the past month has been pretty bad in fantasy football. Like, he's been getting targets, and that's the funny thing, is that he's getting like 6 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets the past 4 games, right? But at the same time, like, it hasn't really amounted to much. And this week he didn't even get in the end zone again. So there's just not as many big plays getting done with Garrett Wilson here. So unless he has like another 100-yard performance, I can't see him finishing much higher than this. And that's the unfortunate reality with him this week. And T. Higgins at 17. Against Tennessee, obviously he was more of an afterthought against the Dallas Cowboys when Jamar Chase went off. The bottom line is T. Higgins for the majority of the year has been great. You cannot think about benching T. Higgins at this time, because this matchup is beatable here versus Tennessee, and just the way that they're playing offensively, nobody can stop this team right now. So yes, it was a little bit of a down week for him for sure, but at the same time, T. Higgins is still averaging well over 13 fantasy points per game, which is fantastic for a wide receiver in fantasy this year. Dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got DJ Moore at 18 and Drake London at 19. Now with DJ Moore at Minnesota, the matchup is great. The first time he played the Vikings too, it was a great game for DJ Moore. Now DJ Moore went back down to reality, which has been the majority of his season this year, when he had 7.9 fantasy points on 8 targets in a half PPR format. That was versus the 49ers here. So it went back down to earth for him. Now I like him because of his ceiling, but I think his floor is still unstable right now. I'm still not trusting this whole Caleb Williams process, so I'm safeguarding myself down here with a lower floor. Drake London, on the other hand, this is a massive problem. I went through this on the What I Got Right and Wrong live stream last night, and I said, listen, Kirk Cousins is still the starter according to Raheem Morris. This is becoming a fantasy nightmare for the fantasy playoffs, because now him and Darnell Mooney, I think they have to be ranked back-to-back, because Mooney is getting the work done, whereas London is still getting the targets. And the unfortunate reality with both of these two players right now is that they're playing with a quarterback who is crumbling before our very eyes. It's over for Kirk Cousins, and they're not making a change. So at this point, matchup doesn't matter, and they get a great one this week. So I gotta be honest, I've got my issues with both of these guys at this point, while acknowledging that their upside is still pretty high. Ladd McConkey at 21 and Adam Thielen at 22. So obviously Ladd needs to play, right? We all know that Ladd McConkey at this point, it's unquestioned, is the number 1 by far in Los Angeles. And just the way that Herbert can play, we know that he could get 100 plus yards in any particular game. He gets Tampa this week. So if he can come back and play this week, he should be in line for a good fantasy performance. Now, there's still definitely room for error here if he doesn't hit his ceiling. He definitely doesn't still have a super amount of upside or anything like that, because they don't target him all the time. But the upside is definitely there, because this guy is the most important piece in this offense at this point without J.K. Dobbins. And then Adam Thielen here versus Dallas. They just got ripped up obviously by the Bengals, and they can get ripped up by teams. Adam Thielen at this point has kind of resumed his role of being their go-to guy in this offense right here. So I don't really have tons of issues with Adam Thielen's role at this point in this offense. It all comes down to how does Bryce play that day? Because even though they've been playing really well, I still kind of just maybe just biased, don't have as much confidence in the Panthers as I should, but I do like how Adam Thielen is playing. He's rising up the rankings fast for sure. Dropping down to our next tier, I saved it for these 3 particular guys: DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, and CeeDee Lamb at 23, 24, and 25. Now with DK Metcalf here, I still particularly think that he should, get credit for potential upside, even though it has not hit. DK Metcalf has not hit his upside. Maybe he's injured. Maybe it's a Deebo Samuel situation, although he's been better than Deebo. Even in good matchups, he just has not hit the upside as of the last, since he got injured, basically. So with DK Metcalf, I've got to put him down here lower because he's been hitting his floor more than he's been hitting his ceiling lately. And then with Zay Flowers here, Zay Flowers at New York Giants, I do think the ceiling is obviously really high with him as well. But again, he's hitting his floor more than he's hitting his ceiling lately. So I can't ultimately rank him too much higher than this based on the way that he's played over the last couple of games in particular. And then with CeeDee Lamb here, CeeDee Lamb has a good game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. It was his first, pretty big game since Cooper Rush came in. Against the Panthers here, in what I thought was a great matchup for A.J. Brown last week, turned out not to be. So I don't have as much confidence in CeeDee Lamb against the Panthers as I did before A.J. Brown just got shut down. So I do think that this matchup is fine. I think that CeeDee has potential, but again, I probably lean more towards him hitting the floor this week rather than the ceiling. And then our last tier right here, starting out with Jordan Addison at 26 and Jacoby Myers at 27. Addison obviously has a massive game. Put people in the playoffs if you had the balls to play him, and if you're in a best ball league like I am, I have Addison in tons of leagues. I got into playoffs with Jordan Addison, very happy about that. But Jordan Addison, again, this week, I don't like the matchup particularly versus the Chicago Bears, so he's going to be down here at 26 right now. And I get it, a lot of people are going to disagree with this ranking right here. Totally understand that for sure. If I'm wrong about this one, we'll go on what I got right and wrong and address it. I will say Jordan Addison is a good play to make this week. If you need upside, Addison's a top guy to go to. But as far as his floor, I still don't super trust it this week versus the Chicago Bears. And then Jacoby Myers it's actually the exact opposite. I trust the guy's floor. I don't care what quarterback he plays with. And it's going to be freaking Desmond Ridder now, because Aiden O'Connell's out and Gardner Minshew's obviously been out. Now at this point, it's a garbage quarterback. But Jacoby Myers just safeguarded, man. This guy works with every quarterback. His target share is really, really, really consistent. And his floor is just really pretty solid. Whereas his ceiling, I don't know if he hits a ceiling game. That's why he's down here at 27, even in a good match versus Atlanta. George Pickens at 28 and Jameson Williams at 29. So with Pickens here, honestly, if you want to know the truth, I don't expect him to play. Versus the Philadelphia Eagles, it's already not a good matchup, so he's down here regardless of if he plays, he's down here at number 28 because of the matchup. And if he plays, I don't think he's going to be 100% healthy. Listen, these hammy injuries, they are not like just a one-game absence and let's batch it up and we're good to go. These are usually multi-week injuries, man. So I personally don't expect him to play, but if he does play, he's here at 28. Jameson Williams at 29. I think versus Buffalo, the matchup, like I said, it's definitely got tons of potential for scoring. And at the same time, I really think that Jameson Williams has separated himself from just being a big play threat. This guy is actually receiving a good amount of targets on a weekly basis. So at this point, he's kind of evolved from more than just a big play threat into an actual contributor as a wide receiver too, sort of like Devonta Smith. And then Jaden Reed at 30 to round this whole thing out. At Seattle, listen, I know people are angry with Jaden Reed and angry with me because I was saying to play Jaden Reed. I understand the issue here. Jaden Reed, the process does not change. This is their best wide receiver here. Make no mistake about it. He's got the highest ceiling, and he hits that ceiling the most often out of these wide receivers. Don't get too mad about this one. I get it, a goose egg stinks. I had him in my lineup in a couple different leagues. I understand the pain. Jaden Reed, though, takes on the Seahawks, who are beatable. And I do think that this offense will get the ball to him more this week. I've got him down here at 30 because he's definitely got a low floor, as was demonstrated, but his ceiling, don't forget this, when you probably don't play him, that's when he's going to go off. So let me know how your lineup is starting to look this week, and if you want to see the top 30 running backs for the fantasy playoffs, click on this video right here.